There's a 42-year-old piece of pop culture that I cannot get out of my mind. I've been thinking about this all week. Streaming services have brought us some of the greatest limited series we've ever seen. You have the stuff on Disney Plus. So you have Ironheart, WandaVision. On Netflix, you have Adolescence, Anatomy of a Scandal, Bodies. But before the limited series on all the streaming platforms, we had the TV miniseries. And in the 1980s, there were 3 miniseries that stood out. Number 1, The Thornbirds. Number 2, North and South. America never gets tired of a Civil War drama. And finally, number 3, it was a series called V. Do you remember this? It premiered in the spring of 1983 on NBC, and it was a series about aliens who come to invade Earth. Now, the visitors claim that they're there to obtain this sort of waste mineral. So it's something that Earth doesn't need. Apparently, it's a waste byproduct of some other things that we produce. So they're like, you're not going to miss it. It would actually help you, people of Earth. We would be getting rid of some of your toxic waste. So it's a peacekeeping, information sharing, environmental type trip. And when they first arrive, they look like normal humans. I mean, they have kind of weird voices, but they look like us. Why would we be concerned? But of course, a few people are concerned. In particular, a journalist, a television cameraman named Michael Donovan. And he goes to cover the event where the aliens are landing. So they all go to this party. There's this very rich lady named Eleanor, who happens to be Michael Donovan's mother. So she hosts this party, and at the party are a few scientists, community leaders, with all the big wigs. And there's this couple that lives in the neighborhood, and the father is a scientist, and they have 3 children, I believe, 3 children. They're chatting after they get back from the event. The scientist was like super excited. What did you think, honey? Like, what was your conversation like with the alien guy? And, did you notice something odd? And he said, I tried to notice everything I could. Did you notice his hand was very cold? That was weird. Did you notice he didn't eat anything other than maybe some raw vegetables, but he stayed away from everything else? And then so the husband says, I noticed something else. Every time he walked by the bird cage, the birds went nuts, almost as if they were in a panic. So something's up, but you're not quite sure what. So long story short, they're not there for toxic waste. They're there for 2 things, water and food. I'll give you one guess as to what these aliens eat. It turns out these aliens look nothing like humans. They're wearing a skin that makes them look like humans, but underneath, they're actually these reptilian creatures that eat live animals, raw meat, and their planet is running out of food. So they come to Earth for a fresh supply. And the people who are disappearing and don't come back are held in suspended animation on the various ships around the world until they can transport them back to the home planet. They're eating the people. Yeah, so after a while, people start to disappear. And the people that disappear the most are scientists. But then they start telling the public, these scientists, they're really terrorists. And they were a national security threat, so we had to get rid of them. And of course, at this point, the aliens have control and influence over not just the local police and the city and state authorities, but the federal authorities as well. And anyone who opposes them or tries to oppose them, that person suddenly has a change of heart. And they were very opposed to the alien presence in the cities one day, and then a few days later, suddenly they're not. So we find out that these people have been abducted, taken to some kind of alien science facility aboard one of their ships, and they've been brainwashed. And how the people who are skeptical notice this is Mike Donovan, the cameraman. He has a tech guy, an editor, and he's sitting there, with his footage, and they're going over it. The UN Secretary General. And he was signing this agreement, basically allowing the aliens to, stay on Earth and agreeing to, collaborate with them and to share resources. And then he notices something. His friend was like, yeah, I covered a UN event last year and I noticed something different. I'm going to show you this footage from last night and from last year. Same guy where he's sitting at a desk signing something. And he said, "You notice something different?" And he says, "Well, I don't know." He says, "In this one last year, he used his right hand. And in this one yesterday, he used his left hand." And he said, "Let me show you something else." Another guy who was some kind of world leader signing a document, whatever, same thing. He used his right hand a year ago, and he used his left hand signing the thing at the alien event the other night. And then Michael says, "Well, people are ambidextrous, whatever." He says, no. Neither of these guys are. I checked. I looked into it because, journalists. He said, up until last night, they were both right-handed. And they signed these documents the other night with their left hand. And he turns to his friend and says, "Michael, something very strange is going on." And that's how they discover the brainwashing plot. So long story short, a resistance forms. Just like in Star Wars, just like in every fascist parable story we've ever seen, the resistance is formed. And they even have a moment where the resistance crashes this big press event and they hold one of the alien guys down and rip off his human mask, and they show his reptilian face and his tongue, and it's weird and it's gross. But their propaganda machine manages to convince the public that it was an elaborate hoax. Does that sound familiar? Oh no, that's not a real shooting. Those are crisis actors. Included in this resistance is the scientist's family. They were targeted for extermination. The Gestapo, whatever the aliens called the Gestapo, was about to come and get them. They were able to leave their home, but they didn't go far. They had a neighbor down the street who was a Holocaust survivor, and he hid them in his family's pool house. The Holocaust survivor, Abraham, he has this nice friend, the little old lady down the street, retired widow, whatever. I believe her name was Ruby. And Abraham says, "I'm worried. There's these checkpoints and there's guards posted everywhere and cops and alien militias. This is a little weird. I feel like our freedoms are being restricted. We can't go across town without a pass. I'm afraid that this is going in a bad direction." And Ruby's like, "Oh, no. You're panicking. You're overreacting. That could never happen here." That's what I said in 1936 back in Berlin. The Holocaust survivor, the journalist, the scientists are like, something's off. Now, before this happened, Abraham didn't ask his son's permission to hide the family. His wife died in the camps, and he had emigrated to the States with his son when his son was very little. They snuck his son out, and then when the war ended, he survived the camps, but his wife did not. Sure enough, Abraham's son, since it's actually the son's house, he figures out there are people living in the pool house. And he confronts his father. He said, "What are they doing here? I know they're wanted by the cops or whatever. You can't do this. You have to get them out of here. You're putting our whole family at risk." And he says to his son, "Let me tell you the story. Let me tell you about Germany." He's like, "Oh, Dad, I've heard this story a million times. I know the story of how you escaped." And he says, "No, you don't. You don't. Because we didn't tell you the whole story. We didn't tell you that we had to put you in a suitcase. We had to put you in a suitcase when you were 8 months old to escape the Nazis." And then he says, "I remember the last day I saw your mother. And she smiled at me. And then I stood there and watched when they marched her off to the showers with no water. And it was only because some people we found that were able to take you and hide you. This scientist family, they're who we were in Berlin in the 30s. And we need to hide them. If we don't, we haven't learned a thing." And so the son agrees. But then there's a hitch. Abraham's grandson, Daniel, is a member of the Hitler Youth, or whatever the visitor's version of the Hitler Youth is. Daniel is struggling in school. He can't get a job. He's angry and brooding. Even before we were using the term incel, Daniel, the grandson, is most definitely an incel. He discovers that the scientist family is living in his pool house, and he knows their oldest daughter, Robin. They go to high school together. He has had a big crush on her for a long time, and he hits on her and she refuses him. And as is typical with incels, the refusal of his advances means, you know what? I'm not going to keep you safe anymore. As is always the case in these fascist regimes, you are encouraged to snitch on people. People you've known your whole life, your family, your friends, your neighbors. He turns them in. Naturally, the Gestapo shows up the next day and raids the pool house. And all they find is Grandpa Abraham sitting in a rocking chair. It is assumed that they take him away. We never see Abraham again. And you get the sense that he knew. He knew exactly what was going to happen. That helping these people would be the end of him. That he would eventually get caught and that his life would be over. He was an old man who had suffered this same thing when him and his wife were a young married couple with a baby. He felt like he, I don't know, maybe owed the universe a debt in exchange for what was done for his son. Because someone helped him to allow his son to escape Germany. Because if he didn't help them, we haven't learned a thing. Scientist family is gone. Where'd the family go? Well, as it turns out, they had a gardener. His name was Sancho Gomez. Let's just say he had some experience in sneaking people in and out of places. At this point, the visitors have set up checkpoints throughout the city in order to keep people from leaving. You were limited in your movement. You couldn't even go from town to town without having a pass or, passing a checkpoint. So this guy's a gardener. He works for several families in the neighborhood. He's driving down to Mexico and he just says, I'm going to go see my family. He sneaks them across the border to a refugee camp in Mexico. Sadly, though, when he's coming back across the border, they open the back of his truck bed and they see that, it looks like there are gardening supplies and, cut grass on top. There's a space underneath in the back of the truck bed that's clearly big enough for some people. And since they had gotten a tip from someone in the neighborhood, they didn't get him going, but they got him coming back. But when they raided one of the alien ships in LA, they found him. They were doing experiments on him.
Paging Dr. Mengele, Dr. Josef Mengele, please pick up the white courtesy telephone.
And the resistance rescued him. So he ended up joining the resistance. I don't know how many times we're going to have to learn this lesson. We've seen it in history. We've seen it on television, in the theater. Christ, Star Wars is an anti-fascist parable. So my question to my country is this. When are we gonna learn how many people have to die? How many freedoms have to be lost? How many countries, how many lives, how many communities have to be destroyed before we learn this lesson? We haven't learned a thing.